We have seen that talent, technology, and partnerships can change the world and our view of the world.
The late, great Whitney Houston is famous for the phrase and the song, "I believe the children are our future. Teach them well and let them lead the way." Well, I'm happy and excited about the work that SAP is doing to really provide technological skills to youth to help them lead the way. And so I'm excited to introduce Alicia Linza, the Vice President and Head of CSR at SAP, along with John Clifton, Managing Director of Global Analytics at Gallup, and John-Ubong Silas, Senior Director of Programs and Engagement at LDI Africa. Lead the way.
Thank you so much, and thanks for having us here today. So our panel today is really here to talk about the opportunity and challenges of activating youth as we look at the global goals. And we're looking at a generation that's more educated, more connected than ever before in history. These are true digital natives in a lot of ways. But at the same time, young people these days are 3 times more likely to be unemployed than adults. We're looking at up to 90 million young people who are unemployed on the planet. So that's really why we put our focus around the topic of how can we give young people the skills they need to not just be productive in the digital economy, but also solve major issues that we're going to be looking at.
So in 2014, actually, I was able to be an LDI Africa Fellow. And what that is an opportunity through LDI Africa is a nonprofit organization that provides service opportunities for mid-level professionals to go onto the continent and utilize their skill sets. I had the good fortune to be placed at an international boarding school, Olashere International, in Osun State, Nigeria. And my role there was to develop a global leadership curriculum for students. And so one of the fundamental aspects of the founder, who was the late Oba Olashere, was that he believed that service was a great vehicle for leadership development. And so with that, and also doing some research, I was able to develop a leadership development curriculum based on the social change model of leadership development. And basically, the social change model of leadership has 2 premises about leadership. One is that the only purpose of true leadership is to affect positive change. And then the second component is that in order to do that, you need to work in a collaborative space. And so through that, they go through 7 modules, which one begins in the individual component, then moves to the group dynamic, and then the last stage is a global citizen perspective, which ties into students conducting a social change project, meaning that they identify an issue there on the ground, and then they actually, as a group, work to solve or address that issue. And I'll give you an example of one of the projects that the students did. One of the things that Olashere has is a partnership with a local primary school. And so the students were tasked in helping teachers provide supplemental learning tools to enhance student engagement. One of the challenges that the local school had was that obviously limited resources. And so the students took charge of that by meeting with teachers and understanding and trying to figure out how they could use resources that they created to help students be more engaged and, again, more attentive in class. One subject area that they focused on was Yoruba. Yoruba is a traditional language that's spoken in that area. What they found in looking at the textbooks that the students had, was that one, obviously it was outdated, and also, secondly, that in the context, it used examples in an urban setting or urban environment, which was strange, or it wasn't connected to the students because they lived in a very rural space. And so what they did, they took ownership of it, and they actually created supplemental tools and gave examples and coloring and drawings and stuff like that. There was one particular girl, Fien, who just took ownership. She bought into the project and just led the way. We had frank conversations about asking why these students didn't have some of these resources, and I just saw the growth in her. And so at the end, they presented the tools that they had provided, and the children were really engaged. And she told me 2 things. One was that she realized that she didn't have to wait to be an adult to make an impact in their society. And the second thing she said was that it didn't take that much energy to contribute something tangible to their immediate community. So I thought that was very profound for a 16-year-old to really realize that. And I could see her projection now, starting up a nonprofit organization when she becomes older. But we have planted that seed in her, and I think that is one of the impacts that we can do early on.
So this idea of being able to offer great jobs to young people is part of our future success, and it is going to be an impact on how much money we make.
Yeah, definitely. John-Ubong, you actually brought up a really interesting point, which is the comment that the young woman made in Nigeria when she said, "I don't need to wait till I'm an adult to make an impact on the world." And I think, as I mentioned earlier, what Gallup has found, the single biggest issue facing the world is jobs. What is it that young people can do now that would help address that problem? We found who are the job creators. At least in the United States, we found that over 60% of all new jobs created in America are created by shoot-ups, which are great entrepreneurs. And so what we would suggest is there are great entrepreneurs at very young ages. In fact, we go into schools in the United States and ask young people, would you like to be your own boss? Would you like to start your own business? Large amounts of young people say yes to that. By the way, at some point when they get older, they start to say no to that. What we need to do is tell those young people, you don't need to change that. And in fact, we need entrepreneurs more than ever right now. The reason for that is when you look at data from the census, for the first time in 40 years of tracking, more businesses are dying than they are being born. This is the first time that statistic has ever happened. So what we need is for those young people to help us solve the single greatest problem that's facing the planet today is to start new businesses. So that would be my contribution to that portion of the conversation. And it would be interesting to hear more about what you see in terms of that issue, entrepreneurship, in Nigeria and the work that you've done throughout the region.
Well, I think entrepreneurship is definitely a vehicle to addressing the skill gaps and the opportunity for employment for the youth. However, I would like to talk about something that is often not talked about that is aligned with the skills gap, and that is the opportunity gap. Before the youth are able to sometimes take full advantage of these opportunities, there are sometimes social, cultural, economic, environmental challenges that prevent them or inhibit them from taking full advantage of these opportunities. For example, in terms of in the area of vocational training, which is something that is being done very much so in Africa. I'll give you an example of one organization that's trying to address that, and it's Wave Academy, which is in Nigeria. And it was started by a diasporan who came back, returned, and what she's trying to do, the organization's trying to do, is provide that pathway to localize the curriculum. So no matter how great the program training is, if you don't address some of those local challenges or issues, then the youth will not have the ability to take full advantage of these opportunities. So in the space that she works in, it's hospitality. And so in Nigeria, it's a booming space. So there's a lot of hotels coming up in Victoria Island, okay? Now, individuals that are working in that to try and get in that industry live primarily very far out in the outskirts. So one of the challenges that she identified was that, and wasn't talked about, was the logistical nightmare that is Lagos, okay? From getting from point A to point B is extremely challenging. So then how would that impact and individuals who, again, trying to get to those jobs on a regular basis, what type of resources, what type of mechanisms can they put in place to ensure that, again, timeliness, which is a factor, a critical factor for employment success, can be at least mitigated or minimized for early start. So these are just some things that I think individuals and organizations who many times have the heart, good intentions, great program design, but they overlook that opportunity gap and addressing that opportunity gap.
Just one other point on that is you talked a little bit about the environments for people that would be entrepreneurs. And it's so interesting because we ask a question around the world, which is in the city or area where you live, is it easy for entrepreneurs to start a business? Maybe I can ask you a follow-up question. This one comes from Namdi Umuna from Nigeria, and she says, students in most of our universities have some hours of vital time every week. How can they channel these hours to the SDGs? What can they do?
Well, absolutely. I think the model that I talked about, the social change project, identifying things that they're passionate about and coming into it as a group and addressing those things. I think sometimes we wait for an external agent to address some of the critical issues. And again, once you start in that process, you finally realize that it's not the energy needed to exert to actually make a tangible impact is not as great as you think. And once you start the momentum, it will grow and evolve and continue. And I think the hardest thing many times for youth and people in general is to make that first step. Yep. Is to try. And it's okay if it's not at first successful. It's okay, but you need to do something. Try. So that would be my advice.